So pleased to have you with us today, Karen. My name is Joni Parsons, and I am founder of Revel 11. And we have conversations about women, things that are important in life, lifestyle, love, and so many more things. And today we're going to be talking about our stories of hardship, survival, overcoming, and resilience, and how they connect us. I'm thrilled to have Karen Sherman join us today. She's had a phenomenal career dedicated to making the world a better place for women, and who doesn't love that? Karen has spent her life advocating for women in war-torn countries such as Iraq, Afghanistan, Bosnia, the Congo, Nigeria, Rwanda, South Sudan, and more. Throughout her 30-year career in global development, she has met and interviewed thousands of women. Their remarkable stories of strength, courage, and resourcefulness fuel what she believes to be true. Championing women's education and economic participation has the power to transform the lives of women and the future of families, communities, societies, and ultimately the world. Wow, Karen, I'm so grateful to have you here today.
Thank you, Joni. I'm thrilled to be here as well.
She is also the author of Brick by Brick, this profound book about building hope and opportunities for women survivors everywhere. Karen, let's go ahead and get started.
Sounds
From
good.
Rwanda, and you were just here in Seattle not too long ago in January talking with a group of women here, and it was so great to have you here in person as well. But first of all, let's talk about the nature of your work and where it has taken you over the years.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm thrilled to be here today and also to connect even virtually with all of the women and other people who are part of this group. I have been doing development work really for about 30 years, as you said. I spent a good chunk of my time working in the former Soviet Union, all over, across the entire region, helping women to really make the transition from a plan to a market economy, and made a change in 2003 to join a group called Women for Women International that works with women survivors of war and conflict and post-conflict zones all over the world, as you mentioned. And one of those places was Rwanda. And I got asked to go move to Rwanda in 2012 to build the first of its kind Women's Opportunity Center here in Rwanda in the Eastern Province. And I was so excited to do that. I yanked my three sons out of Bethesda, Maryland, and plopped them down in Rwanda, left my husband at home, moved here as we were building the center. And actually, over the time that I was here with Women for Women, I got acquainted with the Aquila Institute and was really fascinated by their education to workforce model. And so joined Aquila as their president and spent a number of years with Aquila, helping women who really never thought they would have an opportunity for a college education to go to college and then also ultimately join the workforce. And then most recently, I'm in Rwanda because I've started a business here out in the northern province.
And we'll be talking about that shortly. But let's step back a little bit before we move forward. And it's like throughout your career, you have really grown to better understand yourself. You talk a lot about this in the book, about your traumatic childhood and your life as a mother and wife. And from the stories that you've heard over the years, it's really helped you in your own personal growth.
Yeah, I really talk about that journey a lot in the book because, to be honest with you, Joni, I never really thought of myself as a survivor. I didn't really kind of put that framing on that. And yet I was working with women all over the world who had suffered from hardships and restrictions really beyond the scope of many of our imaginations. And, part of my work was to take down their stories, and I would hear their stories, but there was always that kind of professional veneer, that distance, like, that's not me. And there was something that happened really while I was living in Rwanda. And I had my father was quite abusive with my siblings and I, with my mother, and I carried a lot of anger And I think unacknowledged trauma from that childhood. But there was something about moving to Rwanda, being in Rwanda, and hearing the stories in a different way, where that distance that had always existed before evaporated. And I felt like that's me. That's my story. The circumstances may have been different, um, but actually, I had my own pain. I had my own trauma that I had really not recognized before. And I talk about in the book, it's interesting. I always felt like pain is relative, right? Who am I to talk about pain and suffering when people have survived war and genocide and other like unfathomable things? I really, to be honest, didn't feel entitled to feel that way. And yet, we all have pain that we carry with us, right? And, we have to acknowledge it, and it's as real as anybody else's. So that was a big epiphany for me.
And it is so true that our stories connect us. And you talk in the book about so many stories of hardship and unimaginable things. Like, were there certain stories that you heard there's like, oh, wow, like I lived this? But it is, someone in Rwanda or in this former Soviet Union. But like you said, like our stories connect us and we have that connection. So tell us about some of the stories that you heard that were like, wow, this, I want to share this.
Yeah. I'll tell you two brief stories that have always stuck with me. And one is the story of Grace and Vanessa. Grace was a 10-year-old girl during the genocide when there was, killing going on around her. And she was forced to leave her community with her grandmother. And they were walking to Congo, where there was a refugee camp. And she saw a woman on the side of the road who was laying there dying. She couldn't speak. She had a baby on her chest, and she motioned her to come over to her. And her grandmother's like, don't go, don't go. We've got to go. But Grace, 10 years old, she walks over. She sees the mother, wants her to take that baby, and the baby's too young to walk. She puts the baby on her back and carries that baby all the way to the refugee camp. Her grandmother asked her to walk behind her because she was afraid that it would be risky for them. So they get to the refugee camp, and she decides to name this baby Vanessa. And so they do come back to Rwanda. Grace has to drop out of school because she's raising Vanessa. She is selling vegetables on the street, whatever she can do to earn a little bit of money. And uh, finally, when Vanessa is 13 years old, she tells Vanessa the truth. She said, I wanted to be your sister, but I'm also your mother. And she's like, if you can understand that, we can live together for a long time.
That was,
So that's,
when
I
I
mean,
read
that
that
just,
story in the book, it was just
yeah,
so profound about the choices that we make in life, like that, out of that hardship, that walk, that she found this, obviously sense of purpose in that walk as well, even though there was so much hardship going around. But let's talk about choices and some of the choices that you've made, and choices that you've seen around the globe that have made a difference in people's lives.
yeah. I mean, I think, one of the reasons I tell that story, and not because it's horrific, but what strikes me most about choices is the fact that as a 10-year-old girl, she showed this moral courage, and she made a choice that I think very few individuals, regardless of age, would make. And to defy her grandmother and the people around her to be able to do that. And I think that's the thing about choice is it's sort of, where's your moral compass? What's driving you? What means something to you? And it may not be popular, and it may not be something that people support at the time. I think women in particular do a lot of I can't, I shouldn't, I'm not supposed to. And so we sort of self-limit that way. Our choices, they become narrower, right? And those, it's not because sometimes somebody's telling us that you can't do that. Sometimes we narrow ourselves. And then there's real obstacles. But I think the issue about choice, what I've realized more than anything, it's a gift that many women around the world don't share. And so I think about choice as being both a luxury and a gift.
Yes. And you talk a lot about choice in your book, the choices that you've made in your career specifically that had had an impact on your family. And like, let's take a heartfelt look at that. Like those
Yeah.
were, let's, why don't you tell us about that? Because
Yeah. I mean,
those were choices, like our new theme for Revel 11 is Life Your Way. And I really feel like you've embodied that over the years. So, but there's
for
also
better or worse.
choices, yeah, for better or for worse. And I would love for you to talk about that.
Yeah. Look at I think the biggest choice for me is I pursued a career, an international development career that took me out of the country repeatedly. I was the mom who left. I was always the mother who left. And
Mhm.
that was not a popular choice, I
I've
think,
definitely
and
heard that.
was hard to live with. And actually, it wasn't even so much from my husband or even my children, but a lot of other women who made judgments about my choice, like, what kind of mother are you? Or like, are you ever around? I love this story I tell in the book about, I was home in time to meet the bus one day, and I was standing there at the bus stop, and I was so excited I was there. I was going to see my kids get off the bus. And this woman was telling me, oh, my kids never let me help them with their homework anymore. And I said, oh, I was just, helping my son. And she's like, oh, but you're never around. It must be more of a novelty. And I was just like, oh my God, a novelty. I mean, and, she would have no idea that I'm sitting there in South Sudan editing, my son's essays and, advising them on this and that. But, we all make choices. But one of the things I've realized is we tend to see things as we are, not as they are, right? We put our lens on a particular thing. And so, but I had my own guilt too. Obviously, I've got three young kids. When I joined Women for Women, my twins were 5 and my youngest was 3. And so that was very hard to leave them. It was hard for them. It was hard on my family, my husband. And so, I've had to reconcile that over the time and hope I didn't do too much damage. But on the other hand, I wanted my kids to see a woman out in the world doing good things. And I wanted them to be proud of me. And I think they were and are. And so I think there are trade offs either way. And that's the thing about choice. I can't think of a single meaningful choice that doesn't come with trade offs, not a single one. And I think as people and women, you have to be able to live with those trade offs.
Mhm. So let's talk about that move to Rwanda. That was really stepping into a new life, and you took your kids right away. And as you mentioned, left your husband at home. Talk about that transition and ultimately what it's meant for you and your family.
That is a great question. It was scary actually because I realized in bringing my three sons to Rwanda, they were 14, the twins were 14, and my youngest was 11, that I'd always had my husband there to help care for them. And for the
Mhm.
first time, I'm in Rwanda with my three sons and doing my work and traveling to Congo and South Sudan and other things, and really having to be that primary parent. And it was quite eye-opening. And I think, you know, there's that point in our lives, particularly for those of us who have children as they're getting older, where you start thinking of your kids not just as kids, but as people. And the four of us together became like the four musketeers. They were people, and I got to know them that way. And we kind of approached it as we were having these adventures, but I got to see their lives up close in a different way, and they got to see my work up close in a different way. And I think, frankly, our relationship has never gone back. It
Mhm.
was really solidifying to who we are, parent to kid, and even friendships in the family that have developed. And all of my kids since then have been back to Rwanda and have an affinity for the country. I think it was really meaningful for them.
And it really solidified, I mean, what I took away in the book is that it really solidified for you who you have become over the years. And tell us more about you and who you are today versus who you were traveling all over the globe at, in your work, in your previous work.
Yeah. No, it has transformed me in a meaningful way. One thing very particularly as was having these epiphanies about my parents and growing up and who I was, and wrestling with my own anger issues and trauma from that had been unresolved. I realized that at a certain point, it's incumbent upon you. I had to forgive my parents for what I felt like I didn't get, and I had to forgive myself for not being necessarily the woman that I wanted to be. And that was a hard thing to reconcile. But in doing so, it really allowed me to move forward in a much more positive and vulnerable way, both in terms of my relationship with my parents, but also my relationship with my children, my work, my husband, all of that, because it allowed me to acknowledge what I'd been sitting on for so many years. And that has really opened things up in a really meaningful way. And it has impacted my choices. And so when I first looked at this business that I'm starting now, 10 years ago, you know, one of the reasons I decided not to start the business at the time was I was realizing that my kids were going to be going off to college soon. And
Mhm.
this was kind of a window of opportunity for me. And so I chose not to start a business, which would have taken me out of the country repeatedly again, but to be more present with them. And that was a gift.
I was just going to say what a gift you gave them and that you gave yourself. So you talk a lot about your ability to change one woman at a time. And with all of the different organizations that you've been with over the years, how has your thinking evolved over time, and how to make a difference in the lives of women and girls?
Yes. I mean, my husband and I have this running uh, discussion, we'll call it, where, most of his career has been focused on macro level change, and most of my career has been focused on micro level change. And so, when I say one woman at a time, I mean it. When I think about one survivor, one student at Aquila, one woman that's received a job, and, on and on and on, because those drops in an ocean start to fill a bucket. And particularly when you think about it in terms of women and the huge multiplier you have in that by supporting a woman and how she in turn is supporting her family. And I it's why I think, investing in women is good business. I really believe that. And here's such a great statistic from Aquila that I always remember. These are 78% of the women who attended Aquila were their first in their families to go to college. Most of them never even dreamed of a college education. And yet most of them went out and got jobs, and 90% of them were paying for healthcare or school fees for other
Wow.
family members. So you're taking these underserved young women, you're giving them that sort of educational and work trajectory, and they're bringing their whole families along. And I can't think of a more poignant or beautiful story than that.
Well, let's talk to someone who has gone to the university. And Ruth, let's introduce Rose. And hi, Rose. Rose is joining us from Rwanda as well. And I thought that it would be so powerful to hear about Karen's work with Aquila and to hear specifically from Rose and her experience. So, Karen, I'm going to let you introduce Rose and then have a big conversation about your life, Rose, and your journey.
Thank you, Joni. Rose, I'm so thrilled to welcome you to this conversation. I'm one of Rose's biggest fans. I've known her since she was a student at Aquila and have known and continued to know her since in different capacities. And, when I think of the transformational quality of education and experience and exposure, I think about the incredible Rose and what she has been able to do with her life and her career. And so, Rose, thank you for joining us today. I would love you to tell us a little bit about your story, your journey through Aquila, and where you're at now. But the floor is yours.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Karen. And thank you so much, John and Ruth, for having me today. And I can be more happy sharing my story. I believe it's a great story that has made me who I am today. As Karen mentioned, Aquila has impacted a lot of lives of women, particularly in Rwanda and the neighboring country, because we've also have so many young people joining Aquila from Burundi, from Uganda, and from other East African community countries. So when I joined Aquila back in 2014, I I always say I joined Aquila for the second time because when I wanted to join back in 2012, I couldn't due to the financial constraints. And embarking on those choices that we make in our lives, that was a choice that I wanted to make. But I couldn't make it by then because I had already taken other choices earlier on in my life as a young girl when I graduated from my high school. I just started taking care of my siblings. And then me taking care of myself and my sibling wasn't, I think, wasn't by then a great choice back in 2012. However, I knew the choices you always made in my life were always going to impact me and my family. So I kept working very hard on my choice, which was joining Aquila. I always dreamt about joining a only women's environment because I thought there are so many other women outside there who had the same either life experience or history like I did. So I lost my mom when I was just 12 years, and then the struggle began. But then I didn't allow the struggle to take over. I rather took over from the struggles, started working hard as a girl who is being supported by family members. I owed them to be smart in school. That was the only way that I had to pay back to my family and to my sibling. Then, as soon as I graduated from my high school, started taking care of my siblings, making sure I cater for their school fees, for all other life materials that they needed for them to be able to grow up. And because I knew I didn't want them to feel like they don't have their parents, and because by then my dad actually was still staying in Uganda while I was in Rwanda, but I had tried to bring some of my siblings to stay in Rwanda with me. So when I joined Aquila back in 2014, that was, I think, the foundation of my life. I always love to call it that way. It gave me an opportunity to, it gave me a very solid foundation to speak to other women who have different family challenges, those that had the same life that I was going through. Actually, the survivors, as Karen rightly puts it, in different ways. Either those that survived the Rwandan genocide, because I had a lot of friends, those that survived coming from the families that are not actually that broken families, I would say, families that did not have privileges to raise them as kids, from the conflicts, from a lot of other poverty, from a lot of constraints that women tend to face while they're growing up. So luckily, when I joined Akira in 2014, that was the best support system that I got. I got an opportunity to meet with women mentors like Karen and others who actually showed me that everything was possible, who gave me hope for life, who presented me choices that I could make to make sure my family, my life changes. So I did hospitality management. And I remember in my first year, because we were empowered to think beyond our limitations, to push the boundaries.
Well, I just
Yeah.
want to acknowledge, I'm interrupting here a little bit, but the power of determination. And, you know, if you had not had that determination yourself and that vision for your life, Rose, that wouldn't have happened. So there's so much, you have so much strength and resilience to have decided that this would make your life better. And I just want you to know that you are a shining light for all of the other women and young men who know that now that the journey that you've taken is possible. I would love for you both to talk about your cross mentoring that you're doing now. I know that you've gained a lot, Rose, from Karen, but Karen, you're learning a lot from Rose now.
Well, as Rose said, she majored in hospitality management and went on to have and has continued to have a stellar career, you know, having worked at Marriott, the German Development Corporation, and, you know, now with the one and only resorts. It's one of the most prestigious lodges in Rwanda here. And actually found out that Rose was living in Musanze around the same time that we were starting this business here. And we connected again. And you know, although I was the president of Aquila, I had very limited experience in hospitality management. And so who did I turn to but Rose, actually, to show me the ropes and open up doors and advise me. And she's still advising me. You know, I remember our first conversation where we were talking and about how we were starting the business. And she was just, you know, had such great insights, and very practical and supportive, and even made email introductions for me. And so I couldn't say enough about her and sort of the professional that she's become, so much so that I consider her one of my mentors.
Mm. Rose, look at the impact that you're having. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing now at the hotel.
Thank you so much. At my current hotel, I oversee the guest experience department, which is making sure that we create the everlasting memories. And as we love saying, whoever comes to one and only, indeed, it's one and only. And we want to make sure that you get the best bespoke experience, best personalized experience. That's what we strive for, and that's what has kept us unique in the business. So the team and I have a team of 8 other members. We make sure that from the from the time our guests books, they know what to anticipate, and by the time they arrive, they're actually already excited about their stay, and then we take them on to ensure they have a very seamless experience in terms of the stay, because most of our guests, they stay, but they also do other outdoor excursions. So everything, um, when it comes to the outdoor experiences as well, we make sure that we work with partners, and in case the guests want to go direct with us, we make sure we curate experiences that are going to be always memorable or remembered by the guests. So until the guest departs, you ensure that actually we treat our guests as uh, we treat them unique in a unique way. And I always love bragging about, since you're here, you're home, you don't have to remember anything else. We're going to be taking care of you until you go back home. So they don't even want to go back home because we pamper them a lot.
Rose,
So that
I am so impressed with your story and who you are and who you have become and are becoming. And there's so much that we can all learn from the resilience that you've had in your life, and for you to be that teacher and, like I said, that shining light, which you are. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll
thank
have
you
a
so
close and
much.
we'll bring you back there. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
So Karen, you have had such an incredible career in making a difference in women's lives. And now you've gone from development work to business development. And I would love for you to talk about that transition. But I think that that's come maybe from a lot of the experiences that you've had seeing these women, over the years have their own businesses. And let's start there, like
Yeah.
everything from knitting to, Rose's story, like, and then what? And then it's
And then
you.
what? And it's funny because I always talk about this idea that education gives women voice, but it's really the income piece that gives women choice. And I believe that is a global truism, certainly not just in Rwanda. I've seen that really play out in pretty much every country context that I've ever worked in. And certainly Rwanda is the case as well. And so when I thought about what I wanted to do next,
Mhm.
I really thought I wanted to be more on the job creation side with the idea that I could have more of an impact or a different kind of impact, if you will, by being a job creator. And so even when I left Rwanda back in 2013, 2014, I looked at the idea of setting up a craft potato vodka distillery in Rwanda.
Mhm.
And people might say vodka and
Vodka,
women and
potatoes, why? So
why and
maybe,
potatoes.
okay, why
Yeah,
don't you finish that thought and then I want to get to the why of
the why.
and the how.
So I fast forward, I looked at the business opportunity. The opportunity was not quite right. I wasn't quite ready. And so I shelved the business at the time, but I really still wanted to do this business for a variety of reasons. And so I relooked at the market in 2021, and sure enough, all the trends were positive. And so I came and did an assessment visit in November of 2021. Actually, that was my first trip post pandemic, coming back to Rwanda after 2 years. Relooked at the market, looked at potential sites for this business, and my husband came with me on a second trip in February of 2022, and we moved here to Musanze, to the northern province, Musanze, which is nicknamed Potato City, actually in April of 2022, and we've been here pretty much ever since, on and off. And our business is set to open in September.
That is fantastic. How did you get to be a spirits distiller? I mean, was it because it's the potato capital there in Rwanda, or like
It
how do
was,
you go
yeah.
from development to potatoes and vodka distillery?
I mean, the inspiration really was, I mean, it's sort of a strange trajectory, but realizing that I spent 15 years working in the former Soviet Union, and vodka was kind of the way you did business there.
Got it.
It was the way you socialized, it was the way you did business, you made deals. And so that was kind of my first exposure to vodka. And then
That makes sense.
make that's the vodka piece. The potato piece was definitely the northern province, which is Potato City, and there's something about being surrounded by the Virunga Mountains and the mineral-rich lava soil and the gravity water coming from the volcanoes that just make exceptional potatoes here. So that's the potato piece, and the women piece, some of that comes from my trajectory. It's also the fact that 80% of women in Rwanda are in their living through agriculture.
Mhm.
And also, what a lot of people don't realize is not just in Rwanda, but all over the world. And since the beginning of time, women were the original alcohol makers that
Oh, I had
actually
no idea. A new
actually making alcohol was deemed women's tasks. It evolved, brewing and distilling evolved really from foraging, cooking, and baking, all the things that women were doing. And so who were the first alcohol makers? It was women. And so that was something that I really took with me in terms of the potatoes, vodka, women piece. And really, the impetus for me was to think about creating opportunities for women along the value chain, both as growers, as producers, as bottlers, as labelers, and really creating a multitude of jobs, and not just for women, but for people more broadly in Rwanda. And we're building a facility here. It's a agritourism distillery combination, field to bottle. I've partnered with a local potato chip factory that's working with hundreds of cooperatives in the area to source their unloved potatoes, meaning that they're the small and the ugly and misshapen potatoes, so that we can take those potatoes to make our vodka without undercutting consumption, which felt really important to me because potatoes are still a food security crop here and important for consumption. So we could create a whole new market for these unloved potatoes and convert that into a premium product for the local and export market. So I'm super excited about being able to do that, and hopefully in time having Rwanda's first female master distiller.
That's fabulous. And that's right near your distillery, is right near where the silverback gorillas are, I understand.
That's right. So our distillery is located about 30 minutes from Volcanoes National Park. And so our distillery site actually overlooks several of the mountains in the area. And so in particular, our site overlooks Mount Karasimbi. And so the vodka actually is named Kerry Vodka, named for Mount Karasimbi. Also, interestingly, Diane Fossey, who did all of her research with the mountain gorillas here, and she had her research center between Mount Karasimbi and Mount Basoki, and she nicknamed her Karasoki Research Center Kerry. So to me, I'm also able to honor her history and legacy here with the name of our vodka. She's such a female trailblazer.
She is a trailblazer and someone we watched. My mom, being a single mom, she was always so focused on other women doing amazing things in the world, and we watched her carefully over the years. I want to go back to your book, your powerful book called Brick by Brick. Tell us, I mean, you've had this phenomenal career of development and changing the world through women, and now you're going to be putting women to work. You named this Brick by Brick. Why?
Because at the time we were building the Women's Opportunity Center, and the facility itself was made with 500,000 bricks, literally handmade by the women here in this country. And the way I thought about it, it was like a metaphor for how women rebuild their lives, a brick at a time. And so it's both figuratively and literally something that I thought was really important for the name of this book, because I think even for me, going back and kind of thinking about my life in a different way and having to rebuild certain aspects of my life, it has been a brick by brick. We could say step by step or brick by brick, however you have to do it, however slowly, however long it takes you. I think it's about taking those steps. The steps are so important. And I think, at least for me, and I even have seen, sometimes with other women, that sort of taking that first step or those first few steps can be quite a challenge, right? And it's a little scary. And so I think brick by brick, step by step, they say shag za shagam in Russian. So it's, whatever that is that's going to help you to take those steps to get yourself to a different place. If you want to be in a different place, I felt like it's why I named the subtitle too, Building Hope and Opportunity for Women Survivors Everywhere. And I use survivors in the most global sense, whatever that is. It's not just speaking about war and genocide. It could be discrimination or abuse or lack of schooling or opportunity, or even those feelings that can be crippling sometimes of self-doubt, the things that hold us back. And that's where you start.
And we all have those stories. And, going back to the idea that our stories connect us, whether you have had an amazing career like you have had, and, your story of abuse from childhood, or whether it's Rose's and her losing her mom when she was 12, and then her dad and taking care of her siblings, it is all about determination and resilience, and putting one foot in front of another in hopes of having a better life, like a better life, like you said, for your kids and your family, and for Rose, for her siblings, and for herself. And there's so many nuggets throughout this book about that, about the stories of a woman, starting to knit and having, making $5 a month. And then she was able to, get to, I think it was $1,000 and then she started hiring people. I mean, it is brick by brick. It is step by step. And that's really life's journey for everyone on this planet that we live in.
For sure. For sure.
Yeah. And so, in closing today, Karen, I would love for you to share your thoughts about what you would like people to take away from your journey and your stories, and then what you're seeing regularly in your work. I think that would be so meaningful.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Everybody's got a story, everybody's got a journey. And I think sometimes even the opportunity to be able to talk about it and share it with somebody, to tell a friend. When I was at Women for Women, we used to do trainings in groups of 25. And we did that because many of the women who were coming to the program had never shared their stories before. They never had anyone to tell, and they had been sitting on their stories for such a long time. One woman who was a rape survivor from Congo said that she was just afraid to even say her name out loud. And so, just to think about what violence and trauma can do to a human being. And so to create, safe spaces for ourselves and each other to be able to tell our stories, to feel that it's okay to be vulnerable, and that it's okay to rely on other people, and to the giving and receiving in return. And that also starting small is just fine. I think that this idea that we have to make giant leaps in our careers or personally for it to be impactful, I think is maybe a story that we tell ourselves. I don't know. I'm learning so much with this business. And actually, to be honest with you, I'm scared every day. I'm really putting myself out there in a different way. And my learning curve is huge. And yet, I get up every day, sometimes with a pit in my stomach, and I move things forward. And sometimes that fear is okay. It's okay to be fearful.
The
I think
motivator.
it's a big motivator, the same way that, passion and anger are two sides of the same coin, right?
Yes.
Fear can be a huge motivator. And, I've heard women say over and over again, sometimes you really just have to make fear your neighbor. You have to embrace that fear and be okay with that. But I've certainly had to do this in this iteration of my life. I mean, there's a lot of people who have said, aren't you kind of ready to retire? You've been in development for 30 years, you've written a book, you've done this or that, and kind of like, okay, take a break a little bit. And my feeling is that, for as long as I'm here, I want to use my power for good. It's really important to me. And so I can't think of anything else I'd rather be doing right now, even if it is hard.
I love that. And there's a book that was always in our house. It was called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And I love that. And I so relate to what you're saying as a woman who wants to make change in the world and do well, and to help women in their lives is a passion and a purpose, and to live life like that is amazing. So thank you for all of your efforts to make a difference in women's lives and men. And I want to bring Rose back. Ruth, if you could bring her back with us. Rose, I want to thank you so much for sharing your story today and your gift to so many in your world. Well, again, just keep shining your light so bright, because you are making a difference and making change. And thank you for sharing your time with us today and sharing your story.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Joan. Thank you so much,
And,
Karen and Ruth.
Thank you very much. We really enjoyed being here.
and Karen, thank you so much. And again, brick by brick, get this book. It's so meaningful, so powerful, and you will feel the resilience and determination of women around the globe. So thank you for joining us. And for those of you who are looking for more stories from Revel 11, there's a lot more to come. Check out revel11.com. Have a beautiful day, everyone, and look forward to seeing you very soon online, in person here in Seattle. And I'm going to see you two fairly soon in
In
Rwanda.
Rwanda. Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care.
Take care.
It
Bye-bye.
was a
Bye.
pleasure to be with you. Bye.
Bye. Bye, Rose.